Welcome to part 2 of the Pena Brush Pane tutorial. In the last tutorial on the brush pane, we discovered how to use the brush pane, how to use the 4 various brush shapes, how to rotate and offset brushes, and how to taper brushes. This second part tutorial will explain some of the more advanced features of the brush pane. One thing we did not discuss was saving and loading favorite brushes. You can create brushes with rotations and tapers and favorite shapes, and you can save them into your palette of brushes, which appears on the right here. For example, if we want to save our current brush, we would simply give it a name, A1 brush, and we see that it's immediately been added. Our A1 brush looks like this, and we could pick a different brush, like our expanding dual brush. It looks like this. Go back to our A1 brush, tap to load it, and you'll notice when we tap to load it, we got several choices. We can load the complete brush, we could load just the rotate information, just the taper information, or just the clock information. When we load just the rotate information, that also includes the offset. We load the complete brush to load everything. Or you can load just the components you're interested in to merge that component into your current brush shape. You can also save on an existing brush name by clicking the Save Current Brush Here choice. To delete a brush, just simply tap the red delete icon and click delete, and that brush is removed. Now, the only thing that's saved with the brush information is what's on the brush pane. Colors are not saved, the current program and effects you are using are not saved, just what is on the brush pane. You can save these other items using the regular load save icon. Let's take a look at a couple things that aren't apparent in brushes. Nowhere in here do you see the ability to have an airbrush. And the reason for that is because airbrushes are an effect that are added to an existing brush. So let's make our brush rather large. And let's see what it looks like to paint, and it's very solid. If we go to our effects pane, we already have airbrush loaded, but it's under spatial filters, airbrush. Turning it on, and watch what happens when we paint. It becomes very soft. It's honoring the size of our brush. If we make our brush larger, it will be a larger airbrush. It's not quite the size of the brush because it's tapering to that smoothness. As we paint, you can see how that is a nice airbrush effect as opposed to the hard edge effect. The airbrush can be adjusted in the effects pane by tapping its options icon. You can set the size, whether you're airbrushing in the alpha or not, and which colors you're airbrushing, and which color you want to use as your airbrush color. Normally it uses color 1, but if you tap this, it'll use color 2. Almost always you will want to airbrush in the alpha only. You don't necessarily want to airbrush red, green, and blue. It's the alpha that's providing the transparency, because that's what the airbrush is. It is a transparency. One thing we should point out is that when you're airbrushing, it's always laying on top. Color goes on top of color. Remember in our last tutorial we discussed the depth icon, which allows you to reverse that and puts color beneath color. That will not work with airbrushing. You'll get the first one, but you won't get anything else. And that's because the dim area is actually being drawn and refusing to allow anything else to draw on top. You can see if we make big movements, we can see something, but it's not what we want. So generally when you're airbrushing, you always want to have that depth icon turned off. Otherwise it won't give you what you expect. Another brush that is in the effects menu as opposed to in the brush pane is the stipple brush. And again, it's under spatial filters, stipple. And a stipple brush allows you to paint. Let's turn it on. There's without stipple and now with stipple. Allows you to paint, and it leaves holes in what you're painting. And these truly are holes. Where you see black, nothing is being drawn. And we can prove this by turning on a texture. Let's take a texture and flood the screen with it, and then draw on top of that texture, and you can see that the texture comes through in those what would have been black in our previous example. Now, another interesting thing to do in the effects pane that affects brushes is how brushes actually work. Here we're going to ask to paint with our texture 1, and our texture 1 is the Arches National Park photo that we just showed you. Normally when we're painting, the texture is applied to the entire screen. So you can see as we paint here, we're filling in the texture as we paint. However, there's another option in most effects. If we come over to the options for the texture, we can say fit to brush, and many effects in Pena have the fit to brush option. Let's turn that on and start painting, and you will see that instead of painting the texture to the entire screen, the texture now fits the brush itself. And this is a very important tool, very useful in Pena. Many effects have this capability. Let's go back again and look at that stipple. Let's clear our screen. We'll turn our texture on and our stipple on. And let's turn our brush fit off so that again we're painting to the entire screen. And now as we paint, you will see that we are actually painting a stippled pattern of the photo. When we stop painting and start painting again, the stipple is exactly in the same place, and that may be undesirable. How do we correct that? Many effects in Pena use clocks, and here you can see that at the top of the stipple effect we have a clock capability. We can turn on a clock, but clocks are actually defined in the brush pane. So we go to the brush pane and we use the clock icon down here. Pena gives you 4 clocks, clock 1 through clock 4. Each clock has a starting value and a step value. The starting value is what that clock will start at, and the step value is how that clock will change over time. So we'll use clock 1. We'll set a step to something like a large number. We really don't care what, just to see what it's going to do. And we'll come in and start painting. As we paint now, you can see that the stipple is being changed dynamically. And what's happening is every time our finger is sensed on the canvas, the clock increments 1 more. So the first time our finger is sensed, the clock will start at 0. The next time it'll go 4.995, and the next time 4.995 will be added to that, and then added to that again, and added to that again. That changes the stipple effect so that it is not the same as you paint and allows it to be different. Other effects also use the clocks. We can, for example, let's change our clock. Let's bring it down to something a little more reasonable, like 0.222. And we'll go in and look at our, turn these effects off, and look at our neon diatom effect. And notice that it allows us to use clocks. We'll reset our clock. And I'm going to flood the screen with that effect. Now I'm going to flood it again without doing anything. Watch how the screen changes. And I'll do it again. So again, the clock is in play here. It's modifying the pattern each tick, or each time I'm painting to the canvas, and causing the pattern to change. And you'll see that not only is the location changing, but the very effect itself is changing. So this allows you to animate certain effects and also to change effects over time as you paint. You can see here that the changes are very intense as this clock continues to tick. And that concludes this tutorial.